Now, as the biggest economy in Africa, Nigeria is, of course, a key partner on this conference, and participating in it is Okechukwu Enelamah, Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, who joins us now in the studio. Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to DW. Now, you're here in Berlin participating at this conference, which is about attracting investment to the African countries. In your case, particularly for Nigeria, what do you expect from this conference or from this G20 project in general?
Well, first, let me appreciate and applaud the leadership of Germany, of the G20, and choosing to focus on Africa. For us, that's a very good signal. Second, let me say that it's a very important new approach to focus on investment, like you said, to focus on partnerships, to focus on African countries and Africans accepting responsibility for their own development, because that's the new approach, in a way that we're then partnering with the G20 countries under the leadership of Germany, to create a better world for all of us.
Now, do you think, because some of the critics say that this program just does not offer any specific money to the African countries as a form of traditional aid, do you think that is the correct approach to focus on investment from the private sector? I
think, for the most part, yes. I'm always careful not to say it's either or. So I personally wouldn't say away with aid. But I would say that if you look at the numbers, investment flows and the role of the private sector would have to be much more relevant and significant compared to aid. In the case of Nigeria, where we know we have a very viable and a very compelling economic story, it's very important that we tap into that relationship. And in any event, for the Nigerian government, we have made as our central economic policy, partnering with the private sector for development. So this whole G20 approach under the leadership of Germany is very consistent with our own economic strategy and approach to development.
Now, we know that this project of the G20, on the one hand, promises to offer a platform for coordinated efforts and investments, but in exchange, the countries are supposed to implement reforms. Now, we know that Nigeria so far has failed in providing specific economic policy changes. For example, the IMF says that it is urgent to implement certain economic reforms. So why now? Why should investors, for example, assume that the changes in these reforms are going to come now?
Actually, Nigeria has had a new government for the last 2 years, and we are certainly implementing economic reforms. I'm sure if you spoke to the IMF today, they wouldn't say Nigeria hasn't implemented reforms. Let me just give you a couple of examples that are very, very current and ongoing. By far, one of the most important and significant reforms we're implementing is around the enabling environment. We've taken the very clear view that the most important responsibility we owe to our citizens, to the public, to the private sector, to the stakeholders in Nigeria, is to create the right enabling environment to do business. And this is something that, the president created a presidential council to oversee. That presidential council is chaired by the vice president. It's called the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, and I'm the vice chair of that council. And secondly, we've been working with the World Bank on our ease of doing business rankings because we want to improve that. Yeah. But by far, the most important development in the last 1 month has been the issuing of a number of executive orders. The first of those executive orders is on transparency and on sort of making it easier for people to do business with government. So those reforms are very far-reaching and very well understood. But it's not the only reform you see in Nigeria. We've also created an industrial council, to partner with the private sector for development. And that industrial council is working very well. The whole idea is, again, to create the right platform where the private sector can partner with the public sector, to enhance industrialization and support development.
Yeah, and that is for sure very, very important. But what about two key aspects that I would like to mention? One is the exchange system of your currency, and the other one would be the implementation of specific changes in order to tackle corruption in the country, which are also very important. Are there any specific measures that we can expect in the near future?
Those two are very important. Let me take them one by one, because first is the foreign exchange policy. The first point to make on that is that we recently launched the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, which is a medium-term plan, 2017 to 2020. That plan clearly prioritizes the importance of macroeconomic stability and coordination between fiscal, monetary, and structural policies, meaning trade, investment, and so on. And you will find that, already, we've made changes to our foreign exchange policy. We have something that is called the Investment and Export Window, IFX window, which basically focuses very heavily on allowing market-determined mechanism, which is what the private sector wanted and which is what they've gotten. And if you've been following the Nigerian economy, you find that the foreign exchange policies have been quite stable over the last several weeks. And this is something investors have welcomed, and the investments are coming back. Clearly, that's where we're going to work with the private sector. When it comes to the issue of corruption and governance, we are tackling it in a number of ways. The first thing to say is that one of the most important reasons why corruption will persist or will be in any society is if there are no consequences for people who actually commit corruption or who do things that are wrong. And you will notice that this particular government has been very focused on basically prosecuting cases of corruption. That's one. The second thing is that, like, if you look at the whole enabling environment thing I talked about earlier, particularly the presidential executive orders that were issued, it's around creating transparency in government, because the most important thing you can do if you want to prevent corruption is to increase transparency, is to make people more accountable, and frankly, to put the lights on. And people are already commending and accepting. So I think these reforms are quite far-reaching. And what you will find... Big
challenges. We'll unfortunately have to leave it there.
Okay.
We could talk for hours. It's big challenges. But thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you very soon here on DW Ministry.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.